Seluk's Fable by Léna. Seluk is the goddess of fortune, as in both wealth and luck. She usually appears as a brown fox with golden patterns in her fur. She is said to give her blessings arbitrarily to any beings who can find her. Once upon a time, quite a past time indeed, there was a man. A simple enough man, living alone on a farm he had inherited from his parents. However, he was in quite a pickle, as he was not a very good farmer, for he had taken very little time to learn from his family, and all the inheritance money would not last him forever, though he did think himself very clever. He heard many tales of the animal gods, and had a particular interest, especially at that time, in the fox goddess, me. In legends, I would bestow mountains of gold to simple folk who were lucky enough to find me in the woods. Nonsense, I assure you, but he believed those tales and thought it would be a very good way out of his problems to find me and beg for fortune. And that he did. It was quite a task for him, rambling the woods every night, searching for the shine of my pelt, and as that was one of the forests I frequented at the time, he did eventually find me. He did not attempt to ensnare me or kill me. For all his brazenness, he was not foolish enough to attack a god. He approached slowly, head bowed, and respectfully requested my audience, which I granted him. Not all in the tales were nonsense. I do grant all who seek me with respect my attention, and occasionally my blessing, should it please my whims. Still bowing, he spoke his request. "O great goddess of fortune!" He went on for some time in that way of flattery, and it occurred to both of us that he had not yet thought of how he was going to address me, but I care not for formalities, and he got to his point in due time. "I have come seeking your generosity, for my situation is most dire. My family has left me an old farm with dying crops and cows that give sour milk, and I cannot raise my station to bring it to a reasonable condition." I'll spare you the rest of his groveling, but I knew he was asking for a mountain of gold coins, so I told him what I tell anyone who comes to me thinking gold is so easily given. Give a human a mountain of gold, and they will die of exhaustion trying to carry the whole thing home. In many years, I've never seen that pass into proverb, despite telling it to all humans I meet. But I pitied him, groveling there, with nothing to his name but a farm he could not maintain, so I decided I would bestow a great gift that day. "I will, however, help you," I went on. "I grant you my blessing, human, that it may aid you in your desire for prosperity." I pulled a modest necklace summoned from the soil and placed it around his neck. The object was nothing special, simple bronze and quartz, but the blessing it carried for its wearer was indeed quite something. "As long as this necklace adorns you, your luck will shine brighter. You will know no grave misfortunes. It will not solve your problems overnight, mind you, but in time you will notice your life improving greatly. Be no fool. This gift is greater than all the gold I could give you." He accepted my gift with many profuse thanks, and left without a further word. He spent half that night at the tavern in celebration, spending a good portion of his inheritance on rounds for the house and games of chance. Though he won several of those games, they were not truly up to chance, as is the way of human games, and he lost more than he made, though he was far too merry to notice, and took his wins as proof of my power. Indeed, he lost much less than he would have had he not worn the necklace. Eventually, he stumbled home and slept to midday. For the weeks following, he watered his crops and fed the cows less and less, trying his luck at other things in the town, which he found quite rewarding at first, though the occasional loss frayed his confidence in what I gave him. As is the way with small-minded humans, his doubt grew, seeing only the small misfortunes, which were mere peaks jutting from a sea of good fortune he chose to ignore. He expected perfection. He thought a god's help would whisk away his problems. So when he returned home one night, stumbling from alcohol, to see his crops and cows nearly starved, he stood for many moments in petty thought as he stewed his doubt into anger, and he cursed my blessing and my name, in spite of all his previous groveling, and stormed back to the forest. I'm not sure if he expected to find me there, but when you curse a god's name, they listen. Some mind it less than others. It is exhausting for every small misfortune to be pinned on me, while great coincidences go unnoticed. Humans seem incapable of accepting that some things are out of their control, and that there is often nobody to blame. But I am calm. I prefer to teach rather than punish. I appeared before the man in a flash of gold as he shouted my name at the darkened trees, and he offered no politeness, only insult. You call yourself a god, eh? This necklace is useless. My life is worse than it was, you lying mongrel, he shouted, throwing my blessing back at me. It crumbled to dust on the forest floor. He was clearly too confused with anger to realize the risk he was taking provoking a god, but, as I said, I prefer to teach. Did I not tell you, I started, to be no fool? My blessing is worth more than gold, he interrupted. Nonsense! Confound the thing! If you want to help me, just give me a fortune and be done with this bloated talk! He was clearly not thinking straight. Very well, I sighed. I cannot give you a mountain of gold, for you will surely drown in it, but I will give you something worth just as much, if not more. I spat a shining coin at his feet. 1 coin? He blustered. After a moment, he picked it up to examine it, and found his initial impression incomplete. It was the greatest treasure he had ever seen. A coin it was, but one wrought of purest gold, and the size of a tea saucer, adorned with brilliant gems and inlaid with a pearl in a magnificent rendering of a fox. Though the night was dark, it was illumined by its magical luster, and the natural glow of my saliva. Perhaps he was suspicious, or perhaps the shock of such a gift amidst his anger stunned him, but he stood there speechless for many moments before pocketing the coin and swiftly shuffling away. He slept that night with the coin firmly clutched at his chest. The man started his next day very early, ruminating on the coin's brilliance. He polished it, stared at it, played with it, a boyish smile growing on his face as he no doubt thought of all he could buy with it. The stern look of the fox pattern on the coin not dissuading him. But first, he needed a buyer. He knew the market quarter of this town catered to the wealthiest of merchants, and a coin such as that would create quite a stir with the jewelers. He forewent breakfast that morning. He ignored his cows, and did not notice the cracks growing in his fence as he plotted and planned the best way to sneak the coin into the quarter without being mugged or otherwise taken advantage of, and to find the most corpulent and decadent of the merchants. He thought of what to say, how to say it, and when to show the coin. Most humans see wealth and prosperity as the same thing, you see, and they protect the prospect of it with all the strength or clever planning they can conjure. I won't bore you with the extensive and paranoid details of the man's thinking. Just know the sun was well and fully at the top of the sky by the time he finally, with one last look at the coin before stowing it away in a secret pocket he made, set his plan into motion and left for the market, his hand in his pocket all the while. His plan worked well enough. No one was the wiser of his secret treasure, and he had plenty of time to suss out a buyer while pretending to peruse the perfumed silk stalls. He found a good candidate in little time, a merchant of pretty things who flaunted his wealth like a bird in their feathers. Hearing the man's description of the coin, its size and shine, and the fact of it being a gift directly from a god's mouth, the merchant was ecstatic with interest, and promptly invited the man to the back of his stall to strike up a deal. Both men were prepared to haggle and argue over the coin's value, but when the object and subject of their desires was laid on the table, they were equally shocked in different ways.
"What is this childish joke you're playing on me, sir? This coin is worthless!"
cried the merchant. Where once there shined the purest polished gold, there was only rusted tin. Where once gems had sparkled, there were only dull stones, and the pearl-rendered fox had turned to a knotted, rotted wood lump of no particular shape. The coin was now of so little value, and such a foul odor, that not even charitable folks who asked for donations every day would want to touch it. The two men shouted at each other, and the man was quickly ejected from the stall with his worthless coin clutched in his hands. He stormed home, angrier than ever, not bearing to glance at the coin, all the while muttering, "That fiend! That joke of a god! That foul thing!" His rage this time was beyond words. He barged into his empty house and threw the coin at the wall, stopped suddenly by its shine, instantly restored, as dazzling as it had ever been. He stared at it once more. It was as it had been since before he took it to be sold, all gold and gems still polished, though he could swear the look on the face of the pearl-rendered fox was more smug. Still angry, he rushed back to the market quarter, intent on finding a buyer. But when he again showed the coin, it again turned to rust and stench, and upon returning home, it again shined as brilliantly as ever, the fox ever more smug. It was staring at him differently, almost smiling, as much as a fox can. He repeated this 2 more times, becoming angrier and more frantic each time, until a final time he ran back, the coin raised in his hands, shouting, "Who will buy this brilliant coin? I will listen to all offers. I simply must be rid of it." The shopkeepers and townsfolk were disturbed by this raving man trying to sell a rusted old tin coin on the streets, and upon seeing the looks on people's faces and hearing the guards being called, the man saw the coin was once again repulsive, and he ran back home. He was truly wordless now, fearing he was descending into madness. He slowly but pointedly marched through his farm, past his pen of cows, now empty behind the broken fence, his crops all eaten by the hungry cows, down to the river that ran behind his property, and tossed the coin into it. He cursed my name a final time before marching back to his home. He thought he had come to understand the curse I put on that coin, but his efforts to rid himself of it were in vain. He once again ignored his farm and went to bed, still seething at my trickery, but satisfied to be rid of it. I was told he dreamed very violent dreams of me that night. Upon waking up, he noticed something in his pocket, and feeling for it, his heart was filled with fresh anger and dread. The coin was there once more. He whipped it out and stared at it incredulously, the pearl-rendered fox staring back. He was sure. It was laughing at him now. He could almost hear it, as well as he could imagine Fox's laughter. He had run out of words with which to curse my name. He crashed through the forest where he first found me, and second confronted me, but he could no longer find me. He would not see me again. He threw the coin, only to find it in his pocket again. He tried to smash it with farming tools and saw his dying crops. The coin always returned to its luster as soon as his eye fell off it, and any gems knocked off it disappeared beneath his fingers as he tried to pick them up. In desperation, he tried to stuff it in a cow's mouth, only to find his cows had long wandered off. He even ran to town and paid a blacksmith to melt the thing, which had again turned to copper in the blacksmith's presence, but the coin only burned to nothing in the furnace, and the man found it in his pocket once more. This was my curse. There existed no greater splendor in any treasure of this world, yet not a person in the world would buy it. It was small, yet impossible to lose. It was worthless. It was inescapable, and it tortured him. In time, he gave up on his desperation to be rid of the coin, though he never forgot about it as it poked him in every pocket he ever wore. He began to focus on other things. Whenever he thought of wealth, he would feel the coin, reminding him of its true worth. To want for nothing is not to have everything. And so he sought a modest living, beginning work as a farmhand for neighboring farms, living off the pay and learning much of the trade. Slowly, he began to rebuild his own farm with what he had learned, repairing the fence, planting new crops, and buying new livestock with money he had saved up. The thought of gold was so far from his mind that he barely noticed when he woke up one day with my most cursed of coins nowhere to be found. And though he never had all he could want, he lived happily for all his remaining days. The end.